Happy Pride, everyone. I'm Alex, and I'm going to try and do this in one take. I'm bisexual, ADHD, autistic, dyslexic, as you're about to see, and I'm usually extroverted. This isn't how I planned on launching this channel, but this budget proposal impacts me directly and many other people who are reliant on medi-cal, that's Medicaid in California for those outside the state, and disproportionately affects racial and ethnic minorities, neurodivergent people, and members of the LGBT plus community. Right now, I'm going to pause for a second to apologize for the fact that I have a loud air conditioner right beside me and fans running, so I'm going to try and speak directly into my microphone, but the audio quality is going to be pretty bad. It's hot, and I have to wear clothes today because I'm on camera, so we're all going to have to deal with this together. Also, I am reading off a script this time because I have a lot to say and I would get lost without it. Basically, Newsom is pitching conservative austerity politics as a cover to throw minorities under the bus. The budget proposes to save $94 million in the next year and hundreds of millions of dollars in the following years by forcing people off medi-cal, not because they aren't financially reliant on it to receive sufficient medical coverage, but because they're an easy target. I'll put my sources in the description in line with the script so that you can follow along and read more. Directly from the budget. Medi-cal asset test limits. Reinstatement of the Medi-cal asset limit for seniors and disabled adults of $2,000 for an individual or $3,000 for a couple, effective no sooner than January 1, 2026. And he goes over the savings. According to Cal Matters, a savings account would be included, but they would exclude a home and a car. I want to establish upfront that it's my position that healthcare is a human right, that California, the most progressive state in the United States, is supposed to be a bulwark against the Trump administration's efforts to remove protections, social safety nets, and the rights from marginalized communities. Instead, Gavin Newsom is hosting fascist and Christian nationalists like Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon on his podcast, incorrectly claiming that trans women are a threat to female athletes, and platforming people who would literally strip us of our hard-won rights and protections. Newsom has gone beyond merely discussing their phobic talking points, but outright agreed with them. This is only part of his right-wing grift. He also sided with the extreme right-wing members of the Supreme Court in his anti-homelessness activism, advocating for and personally helping to displace homeless encampments after failing an audit on spending that was supposed to address the housing crisis, wasting billions of dollars, and then refusing any accountability by vetoing bipartisan AB 2903, which would have put tracking and oversight in place and documented results. Now Newsom is blaming local officials instead of taking responsibility for his failure. His policies and executive actions are blatantly anti-homeless. Newsom pushes policies that aren't just ineffective, but outright deadly for homeless people who disproportionately belong to minority communities. But saving money is good, right? Even if some people suffer, the state as a whole will benefit, right? Multiple studies have established that adding red tape removes significantly more people from the benefits that they are entitled to than it prevents any sort of freeloading, and that much of the money saved goes back into the added bureaucracy of enforcement mechanisms, so less money actually goes to people in need. Additionally, the state ends up spending significantly more money on emergency care than it would have spent on preventative care. More people experience life-changing financial emergencies and contribute to or extend the length of their housing instability. Additionally, according to Cal Matters, being homeless is more deadly than in prior decades. I believe it jumped by 238% from 2010 to 2020. Even for those who are just looking at this as a financial issue, the state is spending more than $42,000 per homeless individual. They are paying more per person than most of us are making, and it's obscene because they could be covering the cost of homes, food, education, medical insurance, childcare, and they aren't. The state ends up spending even more money paying for burial expenses of the people they neglected to care for. Programs like asset caps are touted as cost-saving by only providing for those who really need it, but as we've seen, They hurt those most in need, and the money is just wasted elsewhere. Other versions of this kind of program supposedly work by encouraging people to be more self-sufficient. Once again, they obfuscate the real goal, which is denial of care, and don't result in higher rates of work among participants, because those who can work usually already are. Additionally, when Arkansas implemented work requirements in 2016, mortality rates per 100K increased between the implementation and when it was halted. While this is very openly correlation and not directly causal, it is well established that less people had access to health care and that preventable deaths rose. Based on this information, it's clear that even if eligibility doesn't change, access is still restricted. Asset caps have another problem, in general, but also particularly in California. Rent is so high, and mortgages even higher, that even having to pay your housing alone without taking into account the added costs of utilities, food, transportation, childcare, let alone entertainment, would push you above the asset cap and exclude you from medical care. We aren't just talking about high-paying jobs either. Even just working a minimum wage job where you're bringing $2,860 a month before taxes or $2,354 per month after taxes, your net worth is well above the asset cap. In real-world terms, most of us know that to be able to live here, it's almost a necessity to have more than one income almost anywhere in the state. So the extra $1,000 allotment for couples doesn't really mean much. On top of that, according to the Public Policy Institute of California, a fifth of Californians wouldn't be able to cover an emergency of $1,000 or more, and this punishes those who could by penalizing them for having any kind of savings. And you're still well below the recommended housing burden ratio. If you can afford rent and are working a job, chances are you'll lose coverage, regardless of whether your work provides sufficient coverage or you can afford coverage through a marketplace option. Marketplace options aren't even good catastrophic coverage. The Affordable Care Act technically helps to insure a bunch of uninsured people, but the options on the low end aren't great. When I was on a plan through my work, I accrued more than $10,000 in medical debt between the 8 or so months before I was able to get it forgiven by Kaiser, who capped the yearly expenditure at a portion of your income. I believe it's about 10%. But this isn't an option for everyone, and I still have thousands in medical debt that was put onto cards before I hit the cap. Anyone experiencing medical hardship but unable to meet the asset restrictions for medi-cal will be forced to either forego care or go into significant debt. Now, aside from Gavin Newsom, how are these connected? Housing prices, state budgets, low-income medical coverage, Pride Month, and Gavin Newsom being a fascist enabler all seem pretty disparate, no? Get ready for some rapid-fire facts, and I will hopefully not bore all of you, but I will provide links, so if you want to go look at them, you can. According to the Trevor Project, 28% of LGBTQ youth have experienced homelessness or housing instability. 1 in 10 Californians are some flavor of queer and are also significantly more likely to be low income. 1 in 22 people in California are autistic. This is a higher diagnosed rate than in other states, but it's likely due to better access to diagnosis, not higher prevalence. According to the National Institutes of Health, autistic adults have significantly more difficulty finding and holding labor, resulting in lower income and worse housing stability. And the California Healthcare Foundation reports that racial and ethnic minorities are significantly more likely to have worse health outcomes already, let alone the fact that minorities receive even worse care even when they do have Medi-cal coverage. LGBTQ individuals are less likely to receive adequate health care and coverage. 24% of the nation's homeless population live in California. LGBTQ people are more likely to experience housing insecurity and more likely to experience unsheltered homelessness. Half of all homeless trans people in the United States are in California. Putting these together, it becomes apparent that regardless of stated intent, putting barriers in place overwhelmingly impact the people most in need. punish people for preparing for emergencies, exclude people from participating in programs that they need to get by, increase the likelihood of them becoming homeless, and very directly costs the state in terms of capital, human lives, and moral superiority. Gavin Newsom is playing into the hands of the most extreme conservatives in his push to make our lives worse. If you're in California, please call your state representatives to ensure that this doesn't go into effect. I've put a link for findyourrep.legislature.ca.gov in the description. I also want to thank everyone who made it to the end. I'm not going to edit this heavily, like I said, but I do want to let everyone know that I do have a follow-up plan. I've reached out to my state assemblyman who helped to sponsor the bill that Newsom vetoed, and I may be able to have a conversation with him on these topics. I also have a lot of ideas for what I want to cover on the channel, including my ongoing autism spectrum disorder assessment, my other struggles with schooling and learning disabilities, health issues, hobbies, reacting to news and political content, and my experience growing up in religious fundamentalism and discovering my sexuality. I encourage you to subscribe to the channel and comment to let me know what you'd like to see more of. Thank you guys so much for your time.